Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of All, and in this tutorial we're going to have a look at how to get very specific results from the spin tool so that we can do things for exact measurements. So in the last tutorial we had a look at how to use the spin tool, and you can find a link to that in the description. Now I'm not going to specifically talk about the spin tool and how to use it for the basics, that was in that video, but we do need to have a look at how to do things when we want to come up with specific sizes for objects, which is something quite common when we're doing things for 3D printing, and we want to get exact sizes so that they fit on a certain model, also they match a design brief. So on the screen we've got a relatively simple model I've been making. It is just an air duct, and it's got an array on it so that we can increase the amount of air ducts or the length of the air duct that there's going to be. And this is quite a good thing to do for 3D printing, because realistically when you 3D print a model and you cure it, there is going to be some element of shrinking, and that means that when you print lots of things as individual parts, even if they're the same part, they might not look exactly the same and they might not go together perfectly. For example, this join here, if we only had one part, when we joined it to the second, it might not be exactly the same size, so it might look a little bit off. So having an array of this, and then say for example we wanted this to be 4 sections long, and then we can print that as one bit, is going to give a better result than printing lots of individual parts and then sticking them together. So that's all good and easy, but I'm also going to need to make a corner section, because otherwise we're just going to have very straight air ducts, and that gets a little bit boring, especially if these are going to go on top of some sci-fi scenery, either for, let's say, Warhammer 40,000, or shrunk down to put on top of a building for Adeptus Titanicus to make the tops of those a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to activate the overlays, and we're going to start having a look at this problem of building a corner. So first thing, I've already got my beginning of this section, so if I just unhide that. So we've got the same part here so that they're going to join together quite nicely. I can worry about putting a hole in later, I'm not too concerned about that. But we've got a relatively complex shape, and putting this onto a corner would be annoying if we didn't use the spin tool. Now I've obviously got my face here, that's the bit that we're going to want to extrude out, or essentially spin out, and that's going to need to be making our turn. And normally that would be nice and easy. If I was just doing this for CG work, I'd go into face mode, go into Z, shift and space to bring up our options, select the spin tool, and I've got my cursor somewhere around here, or I could move it. So shift and right mouse button, and then I'll just use that to guesstimate where it's going to be. Somewhere like that, and I'd have it at 90 degrees, and that's all great for some CG work, but that's really not useful when we need to be more exact, and in this instance I do. So part of the design brief here is that everything in all dimensions shouldn't ever be more than 25 millimeters, so 2.5 centimeters, approximately an inch. Now that's not necessarily a problem. All we need to know is, instead of guessing where we're going to put the cursor, which is what the spin tool rotates around, we need to put the cursor exactly where we want to be. Now, there's a number of ways of doing this, and the standard way I will go through second, but I actually find that there's a more efficient way of doing this with the spin tool, and I want to go through that first, because if you have the opportunity to do it this way, you're probably best doing it that way. So for this, what I need to be able to do is move these objects to the side, so I'm going to move them over there, because we want to use the origin as a place where we're going to be rotating around. So first thing to do is press Shift and S, and select the cursor to go to the origin. So we're just there. Now your tools, when you press Shift and S, will look slightly different to mine, potentially. That's because I'm using machine tools, and it has this nice pie menu that's quite easy to have a look at. And if you want to have a look at some of the things involved in machine tools, there is a link in the description, so do feel free to check that out. At this point, we just need to think through really clearly what we want to do. I just scribbled this out on a bit of paper when I was working it out in my head. Not that it's particularly difficult to work this out, but you might have something more complex. So I've made a bit of a neater version of this. So what I've got here is my dimensions that I'm limited to, a 25 by 25 millimeter square, and none of the dimensions of this corner can go outside of that. I've also got to have on each end the connection point that joins it to the next bit of the air duct, and that is going to be a millimeter offset from the actual face that needs to be extruded out, and it's 2 millimeters in thickness. Now with some fairly simple maths, we can work out therefore that my pivot point needs to be 22 millimeters away from this outside edge of the face that we're going to rotate. Now I could have worked this out to the inner face as well. My mind just works that way, so I went to the outside edge. So why are we doing this around the origin then? Well, it essentially just means that there's less work for us. Now the first thing we need to do is make sure that the origin of the object that we're going to rotate is going to be on that edge. So I'm just going to go to edge mode, select that edge, Shift and S, and I'm going to move the origin to the edge that's been selected. So just there. Now at this point, if I go back into object mode and I've got my item information out using the N key, mine's already out, but if yours isn't, just press the N key and it'll be shown. We've got here its location. Now obviously I moved this out the way earlier, but importantly, if I just go to the Z axis on the gimbal to look down, I can really quickly put in exactly the information that I want. So the first thing is on the Y axis, that's the green axis, I need my object to be at 0. So I'm going to put 0 there. So now the face that we're interested in, that face there, is in line with the cursor. Then I just simply take the X axis, and in this instance it's off to the left hand side, so it's going to be a minus, and I put in minus 22, and that's going to mean that we are now 22 units, which I'm using as millimeters away, and we can see that on the grid. We've got 10, 20, and another 2. So we've got an exact distance from the cursor that we can then use for the spin tool. And at that point, it's as easy as going into face mode, selecting the spin tool, moving around. I'm going to press Control, so I've got these increments of 5 degrees, and then go up to 90, select that, and I'm going to change this steps up to 60 to get a nice smooth face. At this point, we just need to make the bit at the end, so I'm just going to go back into face mode. I'm going to extrude that out, hit 2, and then I'm just going to press Alt and select all those faces. Shift and click the face at the bottom because we don't want that one, and then I'm just going to go to my extrusion tools, click extrude along normals, and I'm just going to pull that out a bit, and here I want that to be 1 millimeter, and I need to have an even offset because at the moment it's looking a little bit off the bottom here. Offset even, and we've got this object made. I do need to just bring out the bits at the bottom. They're just a millimeter tool, so in fact I might just quickly do that now. So I'm just going to come to the side here, press K to get the knife tool, click there, and then X to get it exactly on the X axis, hit enter, and then edge, select there, make sure the auto merge is off, GG down, and then G and Z, and we've got 1 millimeter up, face mode, and then E to extrude that, and again 1 millimeter. And I just need to do the same over here as well. And now we've got a nice looking corner turn, and if we come to look at the dimensions, we can see that that is exactly in the X 25 units. So it says meters, but this would be millimeters. And here we've got 25 millimeters as well. I think I actually need to shift an A and set the rotation so that actually that's the X and the Y. No problems for that caused by the spin, but otherwise this gets confusing. So 25 by 25, we're exactly correct. So this is made easier just by the fact that we can use the origin point where we can manipulate nice and easy from the location information. Makes everything really, really quick. Now there is another way to go about this. It just takes more clicks, and it is worth knowing just in case you can't actually get to this location. For example, you might have a rather complex scene and you just can't move things around the origin at this point. So let's just copy this and we'll start again, showing how we can do this using an empty. Just accidentally left some extra vertices selected there. So I've got this, and I just need to select this face or select these edges to make a single face. So I've got that to now spin round. So I'm going to move this somewhere else, let's say just here, somewhere where the origin or using the origin point isn't an option. And we'll go through how to do this. So first of all, let's go into edge mode. We'd select this edge and again make sure that it's got the origin on it. This still has that from earlier. Shift and S and origin to edge. Then we're going to move our cursor to this point. So Shift and S, and we want the cursor to the edge as well. So we've got the origin and the cursor there, and then we're going to bring round an object that we can manipulate to do this with. So Shift and A, and I'm just going to bring in an empty. I quite like the sphere one, but you can use whichever one you want. Some people just prefer the plane axis. I'm going to bring a sphere. I'm just going to press S to make that a lot bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this empty object. Essentially all I'm going to do is go to the Z axis, press G. I'll make sure I've got my screencast keys. Apologies again for the not great screencast keys, but still screencast isn't working for me. So G, and then I'm going to press the X, so I can now move it along the X axis. Type in 22, so it's 22 along, then Shift and S, and then select the cursor to move to the selective object. Now at this point the origin's in the correct place, and again we can just select the other object, go into face mode, and then use the spin tool. So not a particularly longer process, but it does just require a few extra clicks, creating an extra object, which can then be something you've got to delete. It just takes a bit more time, but it depends what you need to do. I actually prefer using the origin. I just find it quicker to just have to type in the location into the transform information, and I think that's a nice quick way of doing it. But again, the standard way of doing it around another object, like an empty, is perfectly valid. So nothing groundbreaking there, but an interesting alternative for when you need to get specific about where you're going to place certain items. As always, if you found the video useful, I'd really appreciate you pressing that like button as a tribute to the god of algorithms. And if you want to see more, please do subscribe and press that bell button so you get informed when I post new videos. To end with, here's a sped up version of me fiddling around with some of the details on this corner of the air duct. There's nothing new here. All the techniques are covered on videos that I've done before, but I thought I'd leave it here just in case anyone was interested.